So a few years ago, I had a friend make these incredible cookies. These cookies tasted amazing. And so I asked my friend for the recipe, and she was like, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe it. Not only are these cookies really good, but they're incredibly healthy because they're made with maple syrup. And I was like, maple syrup's healthy? That's weird. Turns out the reason that she probably thought that maple syrup was healthy is because of one guy that was actually paid by the maple syrup industry, the maple syrup lobby, basically to overinflate the health benefits of maple syrup. It's a crazy story. Let me tell you about it. So for more than a decade, this man, Dr. Seerum, who's the dean of the School of Pharmacy at the University of New England, has published more than 36 studies preaching the power of maple syrup and how healthy it is. But it turns out that much of his work has actually been bankrolled by Canada's maple syrup industry and the Canadian and American governments. It just reminds me of that one Portlandia episode with like the celery lobby, but it's like real. And this doctor has literally suggested that consuming maple syrup may help stave off diseases including cancer, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. But other scientists have since told the Examination and the Times that they thought he overstated his lab findings and made misleading claims. So this is just yet another example of how rampant industry funding is, especially to doctors, right? Industry funding is very commonplace, especially when it comes to nutrition research. The ultra-processed food and like beverage lobbying groups have paid out millions of dollars to doctors annually, and now social media personalities and influencers, as well as scientists, they even created their own nutrition journal where they would publish misleading papers, basically saying that aspartame is totally safe, or, sugar is not the culprit, right? It's fat, and we need to worry more about fat and cholesterol than we do sugar, right? And there have been lots of controversies on this over the years. So even with Dr. Seerum, he oversaw projects that were awarded $2.6 million in U.S. government funding recently, including a grant explicitly intended to increase maple syrup sales. And in a recent video, Dr. Seerum said that the nutrients of maple syrup could potentially together prevent and or delay the onset of conditions such as cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, diseases of the brain, and so on, right? His actual studies haven't found that. They have found really small amounts of polyphenols, right? Compounds in plants are generally considered to be beneficial. However, you would need to consume a lot of maple syrup, and then experts say that you would have to consume like gallons of maple syrup in order to get or even potentially get any sort of benefit from it. And obviously there's downsides to consuming gallons of maple syrup. Dr. Seerum literally said at a conference, we have to convince the consumer that this sugar is good for you. We know that the Canadian government and the Maple Syrup Association have provided at least $2.8 million for his research. In 2023, his fees totaled around $37,000. There was one study where Dr. Seerum's team, he gave worms maple syrup in order to examine Alzheimer's related effects. His team observed that some worms fared better, but on average, they were actually worse off, okay? Nevertheless, the top line summary in Dr. Seerum's paper, which was published in 2016, ignored the negative results and said that the syrup extract showed protective effects for the worms. Ultimately, lots of doctors and researchers may be paid as well in order to basically downplay their findings that something is negative or play up their findings that something is positive, right? To me, this is comical. This is funny. However, it just shows that you need to look at something as an aggregate, right? So if there's one person or one journal that keeps finding that something is amazing or that one thing is really negative, like what other research is there out there, right? Are different teams all over the world are studying this and coming to the same conclusions? That's really important, right? So, and obviously the more that work gets done, the more the results get validated, which is why it is important when someone like the UN or huge governing bodies, the World Health Organization, right? When they start validating some of these things would be obviously accepted instead of, these one-off researchers who we then discover are getting paid a lot of money to say that something is really safe or that something is really bad, even though they're getting paid to say that.